Joining us on the Unspoken podcast is senior NFL writer for CBS Sports and host of the Pick Six podcast, Will Brinson. Thanks for joining us, Will.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Hope everything's going well in this freezing cold, whatever today is. Week before the continue.
Don't we know it?
You're right. So let's go right into the playoffs, since that's where we are at this point. So overall, what jumps out at you from the wild card games?
Well, 4 underdogs all covered, which is kind of interesting. I think it's now 10 straight playoff games that an underdog is covered, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. I'm actually doing the math. I mean, like just running back into last year, it's just a ton of straight games where the favorite hasn't managed to put up enough points to cover. You've also got multiple road teams going out there and winning. I think Seattle easily could have won. Philadelphia, of course, upset the Bears. You had the Chargers go on the road and beat the Ravens. The Colts went on the road and beat the Texans. I mean, we almost went 4-4 in wild card weekend on road teams winning. That would have been just insane. And then I think when you look at these games coming up on the divisional round, there's a good chance that I wouldn't be stunned if all 4 road teams won. I get that some of the lines are bigger and some of the matchups might not be ideal for the road teams, but I wouldn't be shocked if all 4 road teams went out there and won either.
That's actually a perfect transition because the Cowboys-Seahawks game, the pass interference was a huge call, which led to the Cowboys putting the game away. Do you think that should have been a no call, and do you think the Cowboys are going to be as competitive as we move forward?
On the specific thing, I think it would. Look, there's pass interference is a problem in the NFL right now because you have a billion replays, the ability to slow things down and actually look at whether a foul was called or not. And it's just a subjective thing that referees are dealing with on the fly, just like, whistling a play dead, because there's no way to go back and look at it and to change the outcome. It just ends up, they mess it up a lot. It stinks. They need to have more centralized replay. I think they should be able to fix it that way. Almost like 90% of pass interference penalties stink or are wrong. I will say this on the Cowboys. Yeah, I think they can compete moving forward. They have a great defense with an impressive front 4 and the best young linebacking duo in Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith in the league right now. I mean, those guys are flying everywhere and making big tackles. And, when you look at the teams, that are going to be trying to get out of the NFC, right? I mean, you have Philadelphia playing against New Orleans, and then you have the Rams playing against the Cowboys. Well, I mean, the Cowboys already beat the Saints once, and they beat the Eagles twice. So you can beat 2 of those teams. So if you get past the Rams, you're in pretty good shape. And they're 7-point dogs to the Rams. But when you look at what Los Angeles likes to do, they like to establish a zone, outside zone run with Todd Gurley to set up their play action, and out of the formations they keep the same to mess with defenses. And I don't know they're going to be able to do that against this linebacking group that pursues as well as they do. And so it might come down to the Rams having to say, all right, we're going to come out and pass first with Jared Goff to win or to get a lead and then close them down with a run. And that's what Seattle didn't do. Seattle wasn't willing to open things up early on, and it cost them in a big way. They just kept running into a brick wall over and over again. I have to think that Sean McVay will approach this game differently. But if he doesn't, for whatever reason, and then they try and force the run, or the Cowboys get to Jared Goff early and often and ding him up, it wouldn't be surprising to see the Cowboys win this game. If they win this game, of course they can win the next game, and it might even end up hosting the free NFC Championship game against the Eagles if Nick Foles continues being a playoff zombie.
In addition to that Cowboys-Seahawks official controversy, we had a near controversy in the Chargers-Ravens that nearly gave the Ravens the win, and that would have been maybe a whole talking point had the Ravens completed a comeback. Do you think that the officiating is going to keep being a problem for the rest of the postseason, in addition to the problem it was in the early part of the NFL season?
Yes. I think that the officiating is a problem in that you have a group of guys who are largely new. Like we saw these guys retire. Like Gene Steratore retired and came to CBS. Jeff Triplett retired and went to ESPN. Ed Hockley walked away. Terry McCauley retired last year. But look, there's a whole new group of officials, and you're asking them to deal with new rules, changes in rules, certain rules like lowering the head that have been called differently throughout the year. Targeting has been hit or miss throughout the entire season, and this is too much of a fast-paced game in terms of all the things that are going on, and you're asking officials to do too much. I mean, I just think that it's changed. You're asking them to do too much with too much scrutiny, and as a result, I just think these officials are being, overworked, and they've got too many things they're trying to focus on at one time instead of just trying to get certain play calls right as they move along throughout the course of the game. And to me, the result has been a watered down product, just in terms of what you get from these officials. And I think the NFL needs to figure out a way to make it better.
We got to see the youngest quarterback in playoff history, Lamar Jackson, in his playoff debut for the Ravens. He struggled through the game, and it looked like the Chargers were stuffing the box the whole game, forcing him to throw more. Twitter was going crazy, calling for the benching of Jackson and bringing in Joe Flacco. Were those people acting irrational, or should the Ravens have made that change?
I think that can fall somewhere. No, the Ravens should not have made the change. The Ravens did the right thing. I understand the idea behind wanting Flacco in there, and if the Chargers are going down, and if Desmond King returns that kick, and the Chargers go down and get a touchdown, and they're leading, what would have been like 19-0, then I think you probably see Joe Flacco, because you don't believe that Lamar Jackson and that offense can put up 21 points in a hurry, and I get it, that's fine. And I think one of the things that you have to, it's not as just simple as, all right, we need to win this game. I mean, you do, you have to win that game if you're the Ravens, because you want to keep your season alive, and you don't want to go out, don't want to go out in a shutout at home. That's never a good look in the final game of your season. But I mean, you have to consider more factors in play here. I mean, John Harbaugh is, not secure in his future with the Ravens. I firmly believe if he had pulled Lamar Jackson, a first-round pick, the youngest rookie quarterback to ever start a playoff game in NFL history, and he'd plugged Joe Flacco in there and lost that game, then he's not coming back to Baltimore. It ends his tenure in Baltimore. It ends the contract negotiations, because everything in Baltimore, like it is in New York, like it is in Arizona, like it is in Cleveland, is built around developing a system for this young quarterback and Lamar Jackson. And so John Harbaugh can't say, I'm willing to yank him at the first sign of 30 minutes of adversity and go to Joe freaking Flacco, somebody that the fans have been booing for 5 years ever since he signed that big deal. And so in that respect, if you're John Harbaugh, you have to keep going with Lamar Jackson and see what you can do and see if you can mount a comeback. Additionally, quarterbacks stink all the time in their first year, their first playoff start. We saw Mitchell Trubisky. He played pretty well stretches, but had some struggles. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Patrick Mahomes comes out a little bit over-amped in his first playoff start. It just happens. I mean, Deshaun Watson didn't look sharp in his first playoff start either. Maybe that's the offensive line, but whatever. And DeAndre Hopkins being hurt. But the point being is that you can't just expect a young quarterback, especially the youngest quarterback, to just step in there against a really good Chargers defense and just dominate early on, especially given that they were running all the read option principles and using Lamar in the rushing attack. I think it was asking, it was a tough assignment to play against Baltimore to play against Los Angeles 15 days after seeing them the first time. Lamar Jackson acquitted himself well down the stretch, and the fans and anybody else who wanted Joe Flacco in there need to realize that Lamar is the future, and you don't compromise the future for 30 minutes of Joe Flacco.
So as a corollary to that, I have to ask, are the Colts for real, or is this a fluke? Are our eyes deceiving us?
Our eyes are not deceiving us. They are a for real team. They've established, I think, there's some question marks. I mean, the question marks about every team. I don't know how their defense is going to hold up against the Chiefs. I could see the Chiefs putting up a lot of points against that Colts, Tampa 2 style defense, because you have guys like Tyreek Hill who can beat, the cover 2 defenses. You have Travis Kelce who can run up the seam and rip off long catches. You have, Damian Williams is playing well. Andy Reid's had 2 weeks to prep against this defense. I think you're going to see some points from the Chiefs. At the same time, if you look at the 5 games after their bye to close out the season, take out the 2 Raiders games because the Raiders aren't very good. And then look at, they played the Ravens, who took them to overtime. The Chiefs won that game, I think, 27-24. They lose to the Chargers 28-27 or 29-28 at home. They go lose to the Seahawks 38-31 on the road. So you lost two of five games to close out, 2 or 3 games against good teams to close out. Nearly lost a third. And all three of those teams run the ball effectively. They pound the rock methodically. They try and eat up clock. They try and take some shots down the field with play action, and then they try and keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. Well, that's exactly what the Colts do. They have a great offensive line. They have a great play caller in Frank Wright. Andrew Luck is playing as well as any quarterback in the NFL right now. T.Y. Hilton is a monster. Marlon Mack is averaging 110 yards and 5 yards per game and 5 yards per carry over his last 4 games, including the one playoff game over Houston. And Kansas City's not a very good rush defense. They're the worst rush defense in football. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if we ended up in a situation where the Colts are either headed to New England or maybe even headed to Los Angeles to play in the AFC Championship game.
So, well, let's talk about the Eagles-Bears game now. Could you give your thoughts on the final play? Is Cody Parkey to blame at all for missing the kick? I know the NFL officially changed it to a tipped kick. So do you give the credit to the Eagles defense? Do you put some blame on the Chicago defense for letting up a touchdown late to Nick Foles and the Eagles?
I think that the Chicago offense probably has to take most of the blame. I mean, look, if you're the Bears, you say, hey, listen, we gave up 17.7 points per game in the regular season. We gave up 16 points, to the Eagles and held them down to 1.8 yards per carry in the running game, and had us in a position to win. We turned Nick Foles over multiple times. Created some fumbles. We got the ball for you guys in advantageous positions, and the Bears just couldn't capitalize. They struggled to really, get points on the board, even though Mitchell Trubisky became the first Bears quarterback to ever throw for 300 yards in a playoff game, which says something more about the Bears than maybe Mitchell Trubisky. They didn't utilize Tariq Cohen very well. Allen Robinson had a big day, but it was mostly down the stretch as they're trying to get in position for these for these scores, and they ended up settling for too many field goals, I think, and ultimately is in the same way that the Chargers were able to win because they settled for field goals and their defense stepped up. The Bears put themselves in a position where Nick Foles is getting the ball with a little bit of time left and was going to march down the field. I think you can also question Matt Nagy's usage of the clock. He didn't call a timeout there with 1:45 or so to go, and the Eagles letting the clock run on purpose, and he could have had given his young quarterback $150 or $140 with no timeouts, which to me is much better than 50 seconds with one timeout. And as a result, you have to wonder, could they have gotten closer for that Cody Parkey field goal? Could they even scored a touchdown, et cetera, et cetera? I think there are a lot of big questions to be asked about the Bears. I mean, it's a really good season, but yeah, at the end of the day, I think you probably pin it on the especially when you hired Matt Nagy to develop an offensive approach that was supposed to be dynamic.
Well, I must ask about the Eagles because I know things seem crushingly familiar to last year with Foles under center, but is there anything different that you see about this Eagles team that may make the path to where they want to go different? I mean, are we destined to end up in the same spot as we were last year?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, if we didn't have the history of Nick Foles and the success of the Eagles, I mean, this Saints line is probably more like 12 or 13. It's 8 right now. Probably end up getting up to 10 by the time the game kicks. And I don't think anyone would be worried about Nick Foles beating the Saints. We'd be like, please, this is over. The ship has sailed. Nick Foles is not gonna make another run in the playoffs. But we're scared of what we've seen recently, and so it's entirely possible, that we all believe that Nick Foles can go to New Orleans and win that game, even though the odds say that he can't. I think he's gonna. I think the Saints are gonna blow the Eagles out. They have a 5-0 against the spread, 5-0 straight up in terms of playoff games at home under Sean Payton and Drew Brees. They haven't lost a home playoff game since like '92. When Sean Payton has 2 weeks to prepare over the last 10 years, 10 regular season, 1 playoff game, he's got a plus 116 point differential, 9-2 straight up, 10-1 against the spread. I mean, you give that guy time to prepare. You put him and Drew Brees in the Superdome in a playoff atmosphere with everything on the line, and they don't lose very often. I mean, they are a dominant team at home. And most of it being shootouts. They put up plenty of points. And I know the Eagles' defense is playing really well. Jim Schwartz has done a great job with the injuries that he's dealt with. But I think with the Saints' offensive line, it's going to be tough for the Eagles to get pressure on Drew Brees. And at the same time, I think it's going to be difficult for the Eagles to maintain coverage down the field. And I think you could have like the Bears should have used Tariq Cohen more. And I would expect that Sean Payton will absolutely use Alvin Kamara as much as he possibly can. I think the Saints in the magic on Sunday.
Speaking to senior NFL writer for CBS Sports and host of the Pick Six podcast, Will Brinson. Now, sticking with the Eagles, as you were talking about Nick Foles and the way that this situation has kind of fallen an awkward pretenses the past couple of years because of the Carson Wentz injury. Do you think that the way that Nick Foles has been playing, that maybe the Eagles might say, oh, we'll keep him as the starter and possibly trade Carson Wentz in the offseason because they could possibly get a huge haul, or do they go back to Carson Wentz for next season?
I think they'll stick with Carson Wentz. I mean, look, I understand the situation and why that would be a consideration. I get it. I mean, I get why somebody would say like, all right, look, Nick Foles makes a run. I mean, if he wins another Super Bowl, who knows? It might be, everything might be off the table. So we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. I do think that when you have a guy that was drafted where Carson Wentz was drafted, with his situation from a contractual standpoint, they got to figure that out. They have to figure out whether they want to pay him or not. His talent, his skill set. He was was going to win the MVP probably in 2017 before he got hurt. And Nick Foles has been great in the playoffs for you. But the reason that Carson Wentz was rushed back earlier this year was because Nick Foles was not playing well for Philadelphia. And they couldn't win early regular season games with Nick Foles under center, and they were struggling. And so I don't think that you mortgage your long-term future that you built in very careful but aggressive fashion by trading up to get Wentz to ride out Nick Foles, who has been on the roster multiple times, who has won you a Super Bowl, who might win you another one for all we know. But ultimately, at the end of the day, is a very streaky quarterback who's probably better served as an upper echelon backup than he is a mid-tier starter.
Well, we got a lot of great playoff matchups this weekend: Colts, Chiefs, Cowboys, Rams, Chargers, Pats, Eagles, Saints. What's the one thing you're looking forward to this weekend?
I Chargers at Patriots. My Chargers obsession is well documented across the internet, and to me, all of these games are going to be awesome. I think there are tons of storylines in each one of the games, and I'm excited to see each one. I hope none of them are blowouts. I hope they're all shootouts and exciting, thrilling events. But I just think that the Chargers Patriots there's so many compelling storylines. Like we've seen the Patriots struggle all year long. It feels like they could come out and show up and just like, oh, right, that's the Patriots. And, if they win this game, they're one game away from the AFC. They're one game away from another Super Bowl. And, they'll be in the AFC Championship game for what feels like the 40 millionth time in a row. Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski are clearly near the end of their run. Bill Belichick, we don't know what he's going to do, but I have to think there's a sense of urgency with a lot of these guys, and they know that their path, while not easy, there's 4 teams left in the AFC, right? I mean, it's the Patriots, Chargers, Colts, and Chiefs. That's a tough group, but you just have to beat 2 of them. And if the Colts can sneak something out in Kansas City, all of a sudden you just have to beat 2 of them at home. So and for Phillip Rivers, this is a spot where he has to see the same thing. He's traveling again. If he wins this week, he's probably traveling to Kansas City. But you get an opportunity at the age of 37 to finally climb the mountain and to win the title that's been so elusive throughout your whole career. I mean, I just think that there's so much at stake for both Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady, and they both know it, and they're both Hall of Fame quarterbacks who, students of the game, understand the history of the game, understand the importance of this. And for Phillip Rivers, who's 0-7 against Brady and Belichick, beat Matt Castle and Belichick back in 2008, but never beaten Tom Brady in the regular season or playoffs. This would be another pretty big bucket list item for his career if he could do this and advance to the AFC Championship game.
Now, moving quickly from the playoffs to the coaching carousel, we've seen a lot of moves. The one that really stands out to me, the one guy being the Jet fan of this group, having Adam Gase being the coach, being picked as the head coach of the Jets. Now, there's plenty of other options. There was a Mike McCarthy out there. There was a Matt Rule out there. Why Adam Gase?
Yeah, you sound excited about it. I think Adam Gase, you look at what you're looking for, a young offensive mind who can work with a young quarterback. And I think there had to have been some concern with Mike McCarthy about, using his old antiquated offensive schemes the way that he did in Green Bay, and working with Sam Darnold. You want to be able to create a situation where, Darnold can make easy throws, can make easy reads. And you saw a lot of that with Ryan Tannehill. I mean, that's the modern game, right? You got to be able to help the quarterback out. And I think Adam Gase does a good job of that. Certainly did it with Tannehill. This is a guy that has the Peyton Manning stamp of approval. That goes a long way. Manning is a guy that, Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time, easily. And he comes out there and says, "Look, Adam Gase is a great coach." And when you hear that, you think, all right, we want this guy. The Jets got beat up by the Dolphins all the time, right? I mean, like under Adam Gase, and he won 10 games of Ryan Tannehill, took him to the playoffs in 2015 or 2016, excuse me, and then in 2017 they go 6-10. But I mean, they did have Jay Cutler for the whole season. Like the guy was retired. Like he dragged a grumpy cig smoking retiree out of the booth and won 6 games. It's pretty good. And then in 2018, you go 7-9, but you had a good run out of the start. I think that Adam Gase has done a lot with, or a pretty good amount with a little. And if you're the Jets, you can go out and spend, maybe you go get Le'Veon Bell. It'd be a perfect fit in Adam Gase's system as a pass catching running back and someone you could split out. Maybe you go get some weapons that work with what he wants to do and work with Sam Darnold's skill set. And you start to add to that defensive setup, which has Leonard Williams, Jamal Adams, some other talents. And all of a sudden, I think you'd be cooking with a little bit of gas. Look, Adam Gase is now on the short list of guys who has signed up to play in the same division as Bill Belichick multiple times in a row, which I don't get. It's fine. Like Rex Ryan did it. Adam Gase has done it. I mean, good for you for taking on the biggest challenge in the world. If they're going to be patient with him and let him sort of develop his players and let him get his own culture in there, I think it can work out. Gase is still just 40, well thought of coach, and I would have been interested in hiring him if I was a GM out there.
Now, one more quick one, because 2 teams stand out to me. So the Bucks with Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles, and the Cardinals with Kingsbury. What do you make of those 2 hires?
I think with you mean Bruce Arians with the Bucks? Yeah, Bruce Arians. I mean, look, it's a good fit. It's be interesting to see how it works. He knows Jameis Winston really well. Jameis has the no risk it, no biscuit type of mentality that Bruce Arians appreciates, and certainly all of his quarterbacks. I would expect that you have 1 year to sort of figure it out with Jameis Winston, and so as a result, it makes sense to get a guy like Bruce Arians who we don't know how long he's going to be in, like how long he's in this for, right? I mean, you can say like like I'm in this for the long haul, but I mean, let's be realistic. It's entirely possible that Bruce Arians is here for a couple of years before he retires again, and if this is a guy that can come in and fix Jameis Winston and set you on the right path with Jameis Winston, that is a huge, huge plus. And as a result, I think that it makes sense from that perspective. From the Kingsbury thing, I like Kingsbury. I think the Kingsbury, I get the concern with him. He got fired by Texas Tech. He was a sub 500 record. It's not what you really want to see if you're signing a new coach. But I think that Kingsbury, if you can surround him with the experience at defensive coordinator, experience at offensive coordinator, get Josh Rosen some protection. He was playing behind the worst offensive line in football at the end of the year, and do some things that clearly Steve Wilkes and Byron Leftwich weren't willing to do offensively. But put Rosen in shotgun more if you need to. Let him give him some quick, easy reads and passes. Make life easier for him. The NFL is set up to do that, and I think Cliff Kingsbury might be able to help out Josh Rosen in that regard.
Will, final question. Of all the teams that won this past weekend, who has the best chance of going to the Super Bowl?
I will take the best chance to go to the Super Bowl. Like, who am I picking to go to the Super Bowl, or who's the best chance to go to the Super Bowl?
Pretty much. What do you see as the Super Bowl matchup?
I think it's going to be Saints and Chargers. Chargers have a tougher path maybe than the Chiefs, because the Chiefs, if the Chiefs win 2 home games, they'll go. Saints Chiefs wouldn't surprise me. Seeing the Patriots there would never ever surprise me. But I would go. I'll take Saints and Chargers. I think they're the 2 teams playing the best right now. We're getting a little San Diego Drew Brees Bowl versus Phillip Rivers. It would be pretty exciting.
That was Will Brinson, senior NFL writer for CBS Sports and host of the Pick Six podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Will Brinson. Will, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, guys, anytime. Appreciate it, and have a great week. Enjoy the playoffs.
You too.
You too. Thank you.